Let's travel, Dad. You deserve to see the world, my son said, smiling. I woke up alone in a hotel in Anchorage, with no money, no passport, and no sun. Just a folded note on the nightstand, 8 words that stole 74 years of my life. If you feel like this story could be yours, subscribe now. Every day, there's a new truth someone needs to tell. Let me know where you're listening from. I woke up to the sound of icy rain hitting the window. I stretched out my arm, reaching for the clock on the nightstand, but my fingers touched something that shouldn't be there. Absolute silence. It wasn't the normal silence of any given morning. It was the kind of silence that tells you something died during the night. I opened my eyes slowly, as if I was afraid to confirm what my body already knew. The bed next to mine was empty, perfectly made, as if no one had ever slept in it, as if Michael had never even existed. I shot up, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. Michael, my voice sounded ridiculous in that huge hotel room, ridiculous and terrified. No one answered, just the rain, just that damn silence. I stumbled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold carpet. I went straight to the bathroom. Empty. His toothbrush was gone. There was nothing of his. I went back to the room and tore open the closet with trembling hands. The hangers were all empty. His suitcase was gone. His backpack, too. I felt a pit in my stomach, that feeling you get when they tell you someone died, and you just can't believe it yet. I looked for my phone on the nightstand. I found it, but when I turned it on, my blood ran cold. It was factory reset. The initial setup screen. Everything was erased. My contacts, my photos, my texts with David, everything. I tried to unlock it, but I couldn't even remember the passwords Michael had helped me set up. My son had left me blind, deaf, and dumb in one clean move. That's when I saw the note. It was folded in 4, leaning against the lamp on the table, like a gift. I picked it up with fingers that didn't want to obey me. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was Michael's, that tight, cramped script he'd had since he was a kid. Dad, enjoy the trip. I don't need you anymore. I read that line 3 times, 4, 5, as if reading it again would change the meaning, as if the words would rearrange themselves and say something different. But they didn't. They kept saying the same thing. I don't need you anymore. 8 words. Just 8 words to destroy 74 years of life. I sat down on the bed because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. And there, in that hotel room in a state where I didn't even understand the street signs, I began to understand that something terrible had just happened. My name is Rafael Ralph Garcia. I'm 74 years old. I was born in Guadalajara, Mexico, but I've lived in East Los Angeles for 50 years. I worked my whole life as an accountant for a trucking company. I got divorced 20 years ago. I raised my 2 sons, Michael and David, on my own. One visited me every so often. The other only showed up when he needed money. Michael was always the smart one, the one with the silver tongue, the one who could make you believe everything was fine even as it was rotting from the inside. David was different. Quieter, simpler, but the kind of person who sits next to you when you're sick without saying a word. I always thought that Michael would change, that one day he'd realize his father wasn't going to live forever. But I was wrong. My son didn't change. He just perfected his lie. I tried to use the hotel phone. I picked up the receiver with a hand that was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 0 like they'd taught me. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered in a language that sounded harsh, full of sharp sounds. It was English, and I don't speak it. Not really, not well enough. Habla español? I asked, and my voice sounded old and broken. She said something I didn't understand. I repeated. Spanish. Does anyone speak Spanish? Silence. Then a click. She'd hung up on me. I just stood there, holding the receiver, feeling like the world had gotten bigger and I had gotten smaller. I tried again. Same voice, same incomprehensible language. This time she didn't hang up, but she didn't help either. She just said something that sounded like, "Please hold," and the line went quiet. I waited. I waited so long my arm ached from holding that damn phone. No one ever came back on the line. I went down to the lobby. The elevator took an eternity. When the doors opened, I saw a young woman behind the counter, blonde, in a navy blue uniform. She looked busy, typing something on her computer. I approached her slowly, like I was about to beg for money. "Excuse me, miss," I started to say. She looked up and smiled, that professional smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I told her my son had left, that he wasn't back, that I didn't have my passport, that something was wrong. She looked at me with her head tilted, the way you look at a lost dog. "What's that, sir?" she asked. I shook my head. "Spanish," I said, pointing at myself. She frowned. She called someone on an intercom. I stood there, feeling the stares of other guests walking by with their suitcases and vacation smiles. An older man came out wearing a gray suit and a name badge that said manager. He looked me up and down, like he was trying to figure out if I was a small problem or a big one. The woman explained something to him in that fast English that sounded like crashing rocks. He spoke to me, his voice heavy. "Is, there, problem?" he said very slowly. "You problem," I tried to explain in my broken English, with desperate gestures. I pointed up toward my room. I made a sleeping gesture, then a searching one. "My son," I repeated. "My son." He nodded, not with understanding, but with that forced patience people have when they're dealing with someone difficult. He typed something into the computer. He frowned, typed some more. And then he said something that didn't need a translation because his face said it all. The reservation was canceled. I didn't understand what that meant until he showed me the screen. There, in letters I could barely read because I didn't have my glasses, it said the room was only paid for until that morning, that there was a balance due for room service, and that they needed me to check out by noon. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:15 a.m., 45 minutes. I tried to pull out my wallet to pay, but when I looked for my credit card, it was gone. Michael had taken it. All that was left was a few loose bills, maybe $50 that wouldn't do me any good here. The manager was looking at me, waiting for a solution I didn't have. The receptionist called someone else. A security guard appeared, tall, arms crossed, and then I understood. They were going to kick me out. They were going to throw me out on the street like a dog. I went up to the room escorted by the security guard, who didn't say a word the whole way. I threw my few belongings into my small suitcase. 2 shirts, a pair of pants, underwear, my blood pressure medication, everything I'd brought for a trip that was supposed to last 10 days. I searched one last time for anything Michael might have left. A clue, a trace, nothing. Just that silence which was now following me like a ghost. I closed the suitcase and carried it back to the elevator. The guard was right behind me. In the lobby, the manager handed me a piece of paper I couldn't read. He pointed to the exit. I walked toward it, feeling every eye in the place drilled into my back. When I stepped out onto the street, the rain had stopped, but the cold hadn't. The cold I felt was coming from the inside, and it had nothing to do with the weather. I stood on the sidewalk, my suitcase next to me, watching people pass by, speaking a language I didn't know, walking quickly to places I couldn't go. Anchorage. I'd always wanted to see it. Michael had told me stories about the giant glaciers, the northern lights, the wild beauty. And now, here I was, alone, abandoned, invisible. I thought of David. I thought about how I would tell him that his brother had done this to me. I thought about whether I would ever see my home in LA again. And then, for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I was too old to feel. Real fear. The fear of dying right there, on a cold street in a strange city, with no one even knowing who Rafael Garcia was. Fear of disappearing as if I had never existed. I grabbed my suitcase and started walking, with no destination. I just knew that standing still was worse. People dodged me on the sidewalk, as if I were just one more obstacle in their path. I saw signs with impossible words. Iditarod, C Street, O'Malley. It was all incomprehensible. It was all alien. I walked until my feet ached, until the sun started to go down and the city lights came on. And it was there, standing in front of a small airport full of people running to catch their tiny planes, that I understood the whole truth. Michael hadn't abandoned me on impulse. He hadn't gotten mad at me during the trip. This was a plan. A cold, calculated, perfect plan, and I had signed my own death warrant without even knowing it. Because the worst part wasn't being lost in a strange city. The worst part was knowing that my own son had sold me out, as if I was worth nothing at all. 2 weeks before I woke up in that hell, I was sitting in my living room in East LA, watching the afternoon news, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. David had come by the day before, and we didn't have plans until next Sunday. I got up slowly. My knees don't work like they used to, and went to the door. When I opened it, I almost fell over. There was Michael with a huge grin, arms wide open, and next to him was a woman I'd never seen before. "Surprise, Dad," he yelled, and he hugged me so hard I almost lost my balance. It had been 8 months since I'd last seen him, 8 months without a single call, not one text. And now, here he was, acting like nothing, as if no time had passed at all. I didn't know whether to be angry or happy. In the end, if I'm being honest, my father's heart won. It always wins. The woman stepped forward with a smile that looked like it belonged in a TV commercial. "Mr. Garcia," she said, taking my hands in hers, "Michael has told me so much about you, I feel like I know you already." Her name was Jessica. She was about 40, with straight brown hair down to her shoulders, wearing clothes that were elegant but not flashy. She spoke with that warm tone people have when they're used to everyone liking them. They came in like they owned the place. Michael was carrying 2 grocery bags. "We came to cook for you, Dad. Jessica makes some chiles rellenos that you are going to love." I followed them into the kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own house. It had been years since anyone but me had cooked in there. Years since that kitchen smelled like real food instead of just the coffee and toast from my lonely mornings. But something changed that day, and not for the better. Jessica moved around my kitchen like she'd known it her whole life. She opened cabinets, pulled out pots, found spices I didn't even remember I had. Michael put music on his phone, some old-school salsa I used to like when I was young. I sat at the little breakfast table and just watched them. They cooked together, laughing, passing ingredients, moving with that synchronization only couples who know each other well have. "How long have you two been together?" I asked, trying to sound casual. 6 months, Jessica answered without turning around, chopping an onion with a skill that made me think she'd worked as a professional chef. "Michael is the most wonderful man I've ever met, Mr. Garcia. You did a great job raising him." Those words sounded strange. No one who really knew Michael would say that. But I kept quiet, because I wanted to believe, because I had been alone for so long that even a well-told lie felt good enough. That night, the 3 of us ate at the dining room table. That big table we bought when the boys were little, the one that was always empty now. The chiles rellenos were delicious. I hadn't eaten anything that good in years. Jessica started calling me Dad, and she'd refill my water glass before it was even empty. Michael told me about his new job at a travel agency, about how he'd finally found his calling. "I organized trips for seniors, Dad. Special trips, all-inclusive, no hassle." He spoke with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager. "In fact," he said, looking right at me, "that's why I'm here. I want to make up for all the lost time. I want to take you on a trip, anywhere you want." His voice sounded sincere. Too sincere. But I was tired of being suspicious. I was tired of being the abandoned father. I just wanted to believe my son had come back, even if it was a lie. The next day, David showed up unannounced as he usually did. He knocked on the door mid-morning. When I opened it, his face changed when he saw Michael's car parked out front. "What's he doing here?" he asked with that hard tone he only used when he talked about his brother. "He came to visit," I said, and David pushed past me into the house, his fists clenched. Michael and Jessica were in the living room. David looked at them like you'd look at 2 burglars climbing through the window. "Little brother," Michael said, getting up with his arms open. David didn't move. "What do you want now?" His voice was cold, sharp. "Can't I come see my own father without an interrogation?" Michael shot back, but his smile was starting to freeze. Jessica got up awkwardly. She greeted David with a kiss on the cheek that he didn't return. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it. I just stood there, feeling the way I always felt when my sons were together, torn in two. David pulled me into the kitchen, using the excuse of helping me make coffee. He closed the door gently and looked at me with those eyes he'd inherited from his mother. "Dad, what's going on here?" His voice was low but urgent. I told him about the trip, about Michael's offer. David closed his eyes like he'd just been punched. "Dad, please, don't fall for it again. That man has never done a single thing in his life that wasn't for himself. You remember the last time? When he borrowed money for that business and you never saw a dime of it back? Do you remember?" Yes, I remembered. I remembered every broken promise, every call that never came, every forgotten birthday. But I also remembered when Michael was 5 years old and used to tell me I was his hero. And that memory, as stupid as it sounds, weighed more than all the bad ones. "David, your brother has changed," I said, even though I didn't fully believe it myself. "He has a good woman with him, a stable job. He just wants to make up for lost time." David let out a bitter laugh. "Dad, he doesn't want to make up for anything. He wants something. And as soon as he gets it, he's going to disappear again. Just like always." He put a hand on my shoulder, his big, calloused hand from working construction. "I'm just asking you to be careful. Don't sign anything. Don't give him access to your accounts. Please." I nodded. But we both knew I was going to do whatever my heart told me to do. And my heart, that stupid old fool that never learns, still wanted to believe in Michael. We went back to the living room. Michael and Jessica were already getting ready to leave. Before he left, Michael handed me an envelope. "These are the papers for the trip, Dad. Read them over. It's all legal, all professional. I just need your signature to confirm the booking." And he left, leaving that envelope in my hands like it was a gift, like it was salvation, when in reality, it was my death warrant. That night, I opened the envelope. There were printed papers with a travel agency logo that looked legitimate. Dates, itineraries, hotels, flights, all to Alaska. My heart skipped a beat. Alaska was one place I'd always dreamed of seeing. I'd seen it on TV, the mountains, the glaciers, the wildness. It seemed like another world. And now my son was offering to take me there. I read the documents slowly. There were medical insurance forms, travel authorizations, places for my signature in several spots. I didn't understand everything. It was full of legal terms, but it looked normal. It looked innocent. I signed. I signed without reading the fine print. I signed because I wanted to believe. And with every signature, I was writing my own destruction without knowing it. The next few days were strange. Michael and Jessica came back several times. She would cook, clean, organize things in my house as if she already lived there. Michael helped me pack. He bought me new clothes for the trip. He took me to the bank to make sure everything was in order while I was away. He asked me to give him temporary authorization to access my account, just in case there's an emergency and you need money wired up to Alaska. I signed everything, because he was my son. Because after 20 years of divorce, of loneliness, of empty Sundays, someone was finally paying attention to me. Someone was making me feel important, and that someone was my son, my firstborn, the one I held in my arms when he was born, the one who called me his hero. How could I not trust him? How could I have known that every signature was just another nail in my coffin? The day of the trip, David showed up at LAX without me calling him. His face was tense, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. He hugged me at the security gate and didn't let go for a long time. "Dad, please, don't go," he whispered in my ear. "Something's wrong. I can feel it in my gut. Don't go." But it was too late. Michael and Jessica had already checked the bags. We already had our boarding passes. We were already through security. David grabbed my arm, strong, desperate. "Dad, if anything happens, if anything feels weird, you call me. I don't care what time it is. I don't care where you are. Promise me." I promised. I gave him a kiss on the forehead, just like when he was a little boy. And I left. I walked through the gate, feeling his eyes staring at my back. If I had known that would be the last time I'd see my home for months. If I had known I would wake up alone and abandoned in a strange, cold city, I would have stayed. I would have stayed and hugged David until the world ended. But I didn't know. And that ignorance almost killed me. On the plane, Michael had me sit by the window. He sat in the middle and Jessica on the aisle. During the flight, she pulled out more papers. "Mr. Garcia, we missed these. They're for the medical insurance. It's mandatory for some of the excursions. Just sign here and here." I signed. Michael took pictures of every signature with his phone. "Just for a digital backup," he said. "I get it now. I know those weren't insurance papers. They were power of attorney forms. They were authorizations to sell my property. They were documents that stripped me of everything, and I didn't even know it. During the long flight, I didn't sleep much. Michael gave me a pill for my nerves. I slept hard. When I woke up, we were landing. I don't know what happened during those hours. I don't know what else I signed. I don't know how many more pictures they took. I only know that when we got off that plane in Anchorage, I was no longer the owner of my own life. I was already a ghost, a man on paper who others would use to steal everything I had. And the worst part of all, I was the one who opened the door. I was the one who trusted. I was the one who signed my own disappearance with a smile on my face and tears of gratitude in my eyes. We landed in Anchorage on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was gray, but to me, it was the most beautiful sky I'd seen in years. Michael rented a car at the airport and drove through streets that looked like they were straight from a postcard. I was in the back seat, my nose pressed to the glass like a kid, seeing the snow-capped mountains, the signs warning about moose, the wide, clean streets. I'd seen this place on TV, but being here felt like a dream. Jessica was in the front, taking selfies and laughing. "Look, Dad, how beautiful!" She pointed out things I was already staring at. Michael drove in silence, focused, but every now and then he'd look at me in the rearview mirror. I'd smile at him, he'd smile back. I know now that his smile was fake, but in that moment, I believed we were a real family. The hotel was elegant, too elegant for what I was used to. The lobby had a giant fireplace, stone floors, and a young woman at the desk who greeted us in English. Michael spoke to her in a fluent English I didn't even know he had. He signed papers, handed over credit cards, and they gave us 2 key cards. "A room for you, Dad," he said, handing me one. "Jessica and I will be in another room, just down the hall, to give you your privacy." I thought it was a little strange, but I didn't say anything. We went up to the 4th floor. The room was huge, with 2 beds, a window overlooking the street, and a bathroom with a big tub. Michael put his suitcase on one bed and mine on the other. "Get some rest, Dad. The tour starts tomorrow." He gave me a kiss on the forehead, just like I used to give him when he was a boy. And he left. He closed the door, leaving me alone with my excitement and my exhaustion. I didn't know it was the last time my son would ever touch me with anything resembling affection. The first 2 days were magic. We visited the Native Heritage Center, we walked along the coast, we ate king crab at a restaurant with checkered tablecloths. Jessica took pictures of everything. "Smile, Dad. Let's send one to David so he can see how happy you are." I posed obediently, with a smile that came easily, because I really was happy. Michael walked beside me, held my arm when we went upstairs, and told me all about the history of the city. He seemed like a professional tour guide. He seemed like an attentive son. I felt important. I felt cared for. I felt alive. At night, we'd eat together in small restaurants, making toasts with Alaskan beer that made me feel dizzy and joyful. I told them stories about my father, about how he came to this country with nothing and built a life. Michael listened, nodding. Jessica cried. "What a beautiful story, Mr. Garcia." It all seemed perfect. Too perfect. The second night after dinner, we came back to the hotel, tired but happy. We rode the elevator up together. When we got to the 4th floor, Jessica gave me a kiss on the cheek. "Rest up, Dad. Tomorrow we're going to see the glaciers." She and Michael walked off down another hallway. I went into my room, took a hot shower that relaxed all my old muscles, and got into bed, feeling like life after so many years was finally giving me a second chance. I fell into a deep sleep, so deep I didn't hear Michael come in during the middle of the night. He opened my suitcase, took out my passport, my wallet, my credit cards. So deep I didn't see him take my phone from the nightstand and carefully factory reset it, erasing every trace of my life. So deep I didn't feel him packing his bag, checking my documents, photographing everything with a cold, calculated precision. I slept like a baby while my son stole my life. On the 3rd day, Jessica wasn't at breakfast. Michael told me with a worried look on his face as he buttered some toast. "She had to fly back to LA, Dad. An emergency at work. But don't worry, we'll continue the trip. Just you and me, father and son." His words sounded sincere. I felt bad for Jessica, but I also felt a secret joy, having my son all to myself. Is everything okay with her? I asked. Yeah, just work stuff. You know how responsible women are, he laughed. I laughed too. We had a quiet breakfast. He poured me more coffee, passed me the basket of pastries, asked if I'd slept well. I told him I'd dreamed about my father, that I'd seen him young, walking these same streets. Michael listened to me attentively, with an attention I now know was completely fake, because while I was talking about my dead father, he was already planning how to leave me abandoned like a dog. He was just waiting for the perfect moment. That day, we visited a glacier. We took a boat tour. Michael took pictures of me, lots of them, always with the massive wall of ice in the background. For the memories, Dad, I posed proudly, wearing the new shirt he'd bought me. In the afternoon, we went to a fancy restaurant downtown, the Crow's Nest, with its painted ceilings and amazing views. We ordered dessert and coffee. Michael recorded a video of me, talking about how beautiful everything was. Tell the camera what this trip means to you, Dad. I spoke from the heart. I said it was the best gift I'd ever been given, that I was proud of him, that I forgave him for all the lost years, that I loved him. He put the phone down and hugged me. I love you too, Dad. I know now he was recording that to use it later, to show everyone what a good son he was, to cover up his crime with fake evidence. But in that moment, all I felt was love. Pure, stupid love from a father who never learns. That night, we ate in my room. Michael ordered room service. We sat on the beds, eating like we were buddies on an adventure. He told me the plans for the next few days. Tomorrow we'll go to Talkeetna, a beautiful little town, then the hot springs, and then, if you want, we can go to a concert. I was excited about every plan. He pulled out a bottle of red wine he'd bought. Let's make a toast, Dad, to us, to this trip, to everything that's coming. We clinked glasses. We drank. The wine was strong and made me dizzy fast. Michael poured me more. Have another, Dad. We're on vacation. I had another glass and another. I started to feel heavy, sleepy. I think I'm going to sleep, I slurred. Michael helped me lie down. He took off my shoes, tucked me in. Rest, Dad. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. He turned off the light. He closed the door, and I sank into a sleep so deep it felt like death. I don't know what time it was when Michael came back. I don't know if it was an hour later or 3. I only know I was so doped that I didn't even dream. I realized later that wine had something in it. A pill, something to knock me out while he did what he had to do, while he packed his things, while he checked one last time to make sure nothing of his was left in that room. While he took my passport from my suitcase and put it in his backpack, while he factory reset my phone, while he wrote that cold, cruel note on a piece of hotel stationery. Dad, enjoy the trip. I don't need you anymore. While he watched me sleep one last time, knowing that when I woke up he'd be long gone, knowing he was leaving me there, alone, with no ID, no money, no way to get home. And he did it. He did it without hesitating, without remorse, like someone throwing out a piece of trash that's no longer useful. I woke up with sunlight streaming through the window. My head was pounding like someone had hit me. My mouth was full of cotton. I sat up, confused. I looked across the room. Michael's bed was perfectly made, as if no one had ever slept there. It took me several seconds to process what I was seeing. I got up, stumbling. I went to the bathroom. Nothing. The closet. Empty. His suitcase was gone. His backpack was gone. His clothes were gone. I started searching frantically, ripping open drawers, looking under the beds, in the bathroom again. Nothing. Just that note, that damn note that changed my life. I read it, shaking. The words blurred in front of my eyes. I don't need you anymore. 8 words that told me everything, that made it clear my son hadn't brought me on this trip out of love. He had brought me here to get rid of me, to dump me like garbage in a city where no one knew me, where no one would look for me, where no one would miss Rafael Garcia. I tried to stay calm. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that maybe Michael had just stepped out to buy something, that maybe his phone had died, that maybe... But no, I knew. Something in my gut told me, something in that terrible silence screamed it at me. I looked for my phone. I found it on the nightstand. But when I turned it on, I saw the initial setup screen, factory reset, Everything gone. My contacts, my photos, the texts from David. Everything. I tried to call from the hotel phone, but it was blocked. I ran down to the lobby. The rest, I already told you. The woman who didn't understand me. The manager who kicked me out. The cold street where I stood with no idea what to do. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something I realized while I was standing on that sidewalk with my suitcase. I realized that I had chosen this. That when David warned me, I didn't listen. That when my own intuition screamed at me that something was wrong, I silenced it. Because I wanted to believe. Because I needed to believe that my son loved me. And that need almost got me killed. I walked for hours with no destination. The city that had seemed so magical just 2 days before now felt like a hostile labyrinth. Everyone spoke that impossible to me language. Everyone walked fast with purpose to places I couldn't go. I tried to ask for help. Por favor, I said to an older woman in Spanish. She looked at me with fear and hurried away. I tried with a young man. He said something in English and kept walking. I tried with a couple of tourists. They were German. They didn't speak Spanish. The sun started to go down. The cold got worse. I kept walking with my small suitcase, feeling more and more invisible, until I got to a bus station full of people running to catch buses that were going somewhere. I didn't have anywhere to go. I sat on a metal bench, and for the first time since I woke up that morning, I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since my father was buried. I cried because I understood that I was completely alone, that my son had erased me, and that maybe, just maybe, I was never going home. I spent the first night in that bus station. I had nowhere else to go. I sat on a bench near the terminals, clutching my suitcase like it was the only thing I had left in the world, because it was the only thing I had left. The station never slept. Buses arrived and left at all hours, announcements in English that I couldn't understand, people running with bags. I just sat there, still, watching the hours pass, feeling the cold bite into my bones. A security guard came up to me around 3 a.m. He said something I didn't understand, but his tone was clear. I couldn't stay there. I showed him my suitcase. I made gestures for no money. He shook his head and pointed to the exit. I dragged my feet out of the station. It was colder outside. The wind was sharp. I sat on the sidewalk, leaning against the wall of the station. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just waited for the sun to come up, waited for the light to tell me I was still alive, that I was still someone. The next day, when the sun rose, I went back to the hotel. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I was hoping it had all been a misunderstanding, that Michael would be there, worried, looking for me. But when I got there, the receptionist looked at me with that face people make when they see someone who means trouble. She called the manager. The same man from yesterday. Gray suit, all out of patience. He said something to me in English. All I understood was no and police. I panicked. No, por favor, I said in Spanish. I just need help. My son left me. I made desperate gestures. The manager sighed, picked up the phone. I didn't know if he was calling the Mexican consulate or the police. It turned out to be the police, because 10 minutes later, 2 uniformed officers walked in. Serious faces, hands near their belts. And I understood that to them I wasn't a victim. I was a problem. They took me to the police station in a patrol car. I rode in the back, cuffed, like a criminal. People on the street watched me go by. I hung my head in shame. At the station, they put me in a small room. Gray walls, a metal table. A young officer came in with a folder. He asked me questions in English I could barely understand. Name? Passport? Why you here? I tried to explain in Spanish, mixing in broken English words I remembered from my kids' TV shows. My son, he left me. He left me. No tengo nada. Nothing. The officer wrote things down, his face saying he didn't believe me. He called someone else. An older female officer came in, her hair in a tight bun. She spoke with the young officer. They both looked at me like I was a suspect. I just wanted someone to call the Mexican consulate, someone to help me get home. But no one seemed to understand me, or they didn't want to. Hours passed. They left me sitting in that cold room. No water, no food. Every so often, someone would come in, ask more questions, leave. They tried to check my identity in some computer system, but they found nothing. Because Michael had done his job well. He had erased me. He had canceled everything. The young officer asked me, "You illegal?" I didn't really know the word, but his tone made it clear. They thought I was an illegal immigrant, an old man who had snuck into the country. No, I tried to explain. I came with my son, on a plane. I had a passport. But without a passport to show them, my words were just air. The female officer asked if I had family in Alaska. I shook my head. She asked if I had money. I shook my head again. She asked where I was going to sleep. I had no answer. She and the young officer exchanged a look, and I knew what they were thinking. This old man is a problem nobody wants to solve. They tried to call the Mexican consulate, but it was Sunday. Closed. There was no one who could help me. The young officer showed me something on his computer, security camera footage from the hotel. He motioned for me to watch. There was Michael, at 5:04 a.m., walking out of the hotel with 2 suitcases, his and mine, walking calmly to a taxi, getting in with all of it and disappearing into the darkness. The image was so clear, it left no room for doubt. My son had stolen my things and left. The officer looked at me, waiting for an explanation. "Es mi hijo," I said, my voice breaking. My son. I don't know if he understood. I don't know if he cared. I just know that after they showed me that video, they let me go. They gave me back my small suitcase, which they had searched, probably looking for drugs. They opened the station door and gently pushed me outside. With no documents, no money, no anything. Just the clothes on my back and a suitcase with 3 changes of old clothes. I walked out onto the street, feeling like the world had gotten bigger and I had gotten smaller. It was mid-afternoon on a Sunday. The streets were full of families out for a walk, couples holding hands, tourists taking pictures. I walked among them like a ghost, like someone who didn't exist anymore. I tried to beg for money. I stood on a corner, my hand out. People walked by without looking at me. Some looked with disgust, others with pity. No one gave me anything. A man yelled something at me in English that sounded like an insult. A woman crossed the street to avoid me. I put my hand down after 2 hours. I'd collected a few coins. I don't even know what they were worth. I didn't know what I could buy. I didn't know where to buy cheap food. I didn't know anything. I was a 74-year-old child, lost in a world that didn't belong to me. That night, I went back to the bus station. I sat on the same bench as the night before. This time, the security guard didn't kick me out. Maybe he felt sorry for me. Or maybe he just didn't want to deal with me. It was colder than the night before. I was shaking uncontrollably. I took an extra shirt out of my suitcase and put it on over the one I was wearing. It didn't help much. I saw other homeless people sleeping in corners of the station, young men, some with dogs, others with cardboard signs. I approached one who looked like he might be Latino. "Do you speak Spanish?" I asked, hopeful. He looked at me with empty eyes and shook his head. He was Russian or something from a place that sounded nothing like Spanish. I walked away, feeling more alone than ever. Because being surrounded by people and not being able to communicate is worse than being completely alone. It's being alive and dead at the same time. If you're listening to my story, please tell me in the comments what state or country you're watching from. Sometimes, just knowing there are people in the world who hear me, it gives me the strength to keep telling this truth that cost me so much. On Monday morning, I woke up with my whole body aching from sleeping sitting up. I was hungry. A hunger that clawed at my stomach from the inside. I walked the streets looking for something. I don't know what. A miracle maybe, or just a piece of bread. I saw a bakery. I went in. The smell of fresh bread made my mouth water. I pointed at a small roll. The baker told me the price. I showed him the few coins I had. He counted them and shook his head. Not enough. I tried to explain with gestures that I was hungry, that I hadn't eaten in 2 days. He looked at me with pity, but shook his head again. His job was to sell bread, not give it away. I left, my eyes full of tears, my stomach empty, my dignity in shreds. I kept walking, aimlessly. I passed by historic buildings, beautiful places that I didn't care about anymore. I just wanted to eat. I just wanted to sleep in a bed. I just wanted to be Rafael Garcia again, not this nameless ghost wandering foreign streets. I ended up in a large square where tourists were feeding pigeons. I sat on a bench and just watched them. A little girl looked at me and said something to her mother, pointing. The mother grabbed her hand and pulled her away quickly, as if I were dangerous, as if I were someone to be protected from, and maybe she was right, because I wasn't a person anymore. I was a bundle of rags, a problem, a dirty, lost old man that everyone wanted to get away from. For the first time in my life, I understood what it means to be invisible. Not because people don't see you, but because they see you and choose to ignore you. That afternoon, I saw a Catholic church. I recognized the cross. I went in without thinking. Inside, it smelled like incense and candles. A few people were praying in the pews. I sat in the back row and just existed. I didn't pray. I didn't have the words to pray. I just sat there, feeling the silence, a different kind of silence than the street, a silence that didn't judge me, that wasn't afraid of me. After a while, a priest came over. He was older, in a black cassock with a silver cross. He spoke to me in a language that wasn't English. It sounded like Italian. I answered him in Spanish. He understood something, because he nodded and motioned for me to follow him. I followed him to a small room in the back of the church. He gave me a bowl of hot soup and a piece of bread. I cried while I ate. I cried with gratitude. I cried with shame. I cried because a stranger was treating me with more humanity than my own son. The Italian priest let me sleep there that night in a small room with a cot and a thin blanket. It was the first time in 3 days that I'd slept lying down, that I'd closed my eyes without feeling like I was going to freeze to death, that I rested, knowing I was safe, even if just for one night. The next day, when I woke up, the priest was waiting for me with a simple breakfast, coffee with milk and bread with jam. He spoke to me in Italian, mixed with gestures. I understood that I couldn't stay, that the church wasn't a permanent shelter. I understood that I had to keep looking for help, that I had to find my way to the consulate, that I had to survive. I left that church with a full stomach, but an empty soul. I walked those streets again, which now seemed like a prison. And it was there, standing on a corner, watching cars and people go by, people who had places to go, that I understood the whole truth. Michael hadn't just abandoned me. He had condemned me. He had left me to die, slowly, in a foreign city. And the worst part was, he was probably already back in LA, living my life, spending my money, sleeping peacefully, while I was dying, a little at a time, on these cold streets. And nobody, absolutely nobody, knew where Rafael Garcia was. After leaving the church where the priest had given me shelter for a night, I was back on the streets. It was October, and the cold in Anchorage doesn't play. I only had a thin jacket I'd packed, thinking I'd be in heated hotels, walking through museums, eating in restaurants, not sleeping on the street. The wind cut through the fabric like it wasn't even there. I walked, looking for a place to spend the night, a place where they wouldn't kick me out, a place where I wouldn't feel like I was going to freeze to death. I went back to the Coletti station, no, the bus station, that big bus station that had become my only refuge. I sat on the same metal bench as the nights before. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to keep my body heat in. The metal was ice cold. My old bones protested, but I had nowhere else to go. That cold bench was my only home. The night was endless. I shivered so hard, I thought my teeth would break from chattering. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I started to drift off, the cold would jolt me awake with a shudder that shook my whole body. There were other homeless people in the station, a young man with a dog wrapped in cardboard near the entrance, an older woman with plastic bags full of her belongings, muttering to herself on the floor. I looked at them, thinking, this is how I end. This is what the end of Rafael Garcia looks like. At 4 a.m., a group of drunk kids stumbled through. One of them saw me and said something to his friends. They laughed. He tossed a coin that rolled to my feet. I didn't pick it up. I still had some pride left, though I don't know what good pride was doing me. You couldn't eat pride. You couldn't wear it to stay warm. When the second day of my life on the streets dawned, I stood up, my body aching. Everything hurt. My back, my legs, my neck. I was 74 years old, and I had just slept sitting up on a metal bench for 6 hours. I went to the station bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself. The man looking back at me had a 3-day beard, deep dark circles under his eyes, gray skin. He looked like a beggar. 'Cause that's what I was. I splashed cold water on my face. I wet my hair and combed it with my fingers. I tried to look presentable, but it was no use. The misery was written on every wrinkle, in every tired gesture. I left the bathroom and stood at the entrance of the station. I held out my hand. I felt the humiliation burn hotter than the cold. Rafael Garcia, retired accountant, father of 2, owner of a home in East LA, was begging for change in a bus station in Alaska. Life can play some cruel tricks. People hurried past, some glanced at me and sped up, others ignored me completely, as if I were part of the furniture. A woman saw me and clutched her purse to her chest, as if I was going to rob her. I stood there for 3 hours. 3 hours with my hand out, feeling like every minute stole another piece of my soul. I collected a few coins, not many, maybe the equivalent of $2 or $3. I didn't know what I could buy with it. A man in a suit gave me a dollar bill and kept walking, without looking me in the eye. I grabbed the bill with a trembling hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was the difference between eating and not eating, between living one more day or giving up right there. I put the money in my pocket and looked for a cheap place to eat. I found a food truck selling something that looked like Hot Pockets. I pointed at one and showed the vendor my money. He counted the coins in the bill. He nodded, and he gave me the pastry, wrapped in paper. It was warm. I ate it right there, standing on the street, not caring who saw me. It had meat and vegetables in it. It tasted like heaven. It was the first real food I'd had since the soup from the Italian priest. I chewed slowly, savoring every bite, feeling my empty stomach receive the food like it was a gift from God. When I finished, I wiped my mouth on the sleeve of my jacket. And then, I couldn't help it. I cried. I stood there in the middle of the street with people rushing all around me, and I cried. I cried because I had just eaten a cheap pastry from a food truck, and it was the best meal of my life. I cried because this was my reality now, and I didn't know if I was going to survive it. The 3rd day was worse. I woke up on the same bench, more sore, more tired, more empty. I wasn't hungry anymore. I just felt a deep exhaustion that went beyond my body. It was a weariness of the soul, a weariness of existing. I got up somehow and started walking. I didn't beg this time. I just walked, looking for something. I didn't know what. Maybe looking for someone who spoke Spanish. Maybe looking for a miracle. I went into stores, coffee shops, anywhere there were people. ¿Alguien habla español? I'd ask, my voice hoarse. They'd look at me, confused. They'd say things in English I didn't understand. I'd leave and keep walking, again and again. Spanish? Does anyone speak Spanish? My voice got more desperate with every try, more pleading, more broken, but nobody helped me. Nobody understood me. I was a ghost, screaming in a language no one could hear. In the afternoon, walking aimlessly, I saw another church. It was different from the Italian priests, bigger, older. It had tall steeples and a huge wooden door. I went in. Inside it was dark and cool. Candles were lit, the smell of incense, and in the pews, people were listening to a service. The pastor was speaking in English. I couldn't understand a word, but I sat in the back pew anyway. I closed my eyes. I tried to pray, but I couldn't find the words. Only images. I saw David, as a little boy, running in the tiny yard of our house. I saw Michael as a baby, sleeping in my arms. I saw my father, the one who came to this country looking for a better life. I saw my empty house in East LA, and then I cried. I cried silently, my shoulders shaking, my hands clenched in a prayer that had no words. Only pain. Only a silent scream to God, asking why. Why had my son done this to me? Why me? Why? When the service ended, people started to leave. I stayed seated. I had nowhere to go. I was in no hurry to get back to the cold. A pastor approached me. He was different, younger, with glasses and a kind face. He said something to me in English. I shook my head. Spanish, I said. He frowned, thinking. Then he said something else. All I understood was the word help. I nodded desperately. Yes, please, help, ayuda. He motioned for me to follow him. I followed him to a small office in the back of the church. There was another person there, an older woman, organizing papers. The pastor spoke to her, pointing at me. She looked at me with that expression I already knew. Pity mixed with discomfort, the problem nobody wants to solve. I sat in a chair they offered me and waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I just waited. The woman made a phone call. She spoke for several minutes, hung up. She looked at me and said one word, very slowly. Tomorrow. I understood that. Tomorrow. But tomorrow what? The pastor explained with gestures that someone would come tomorrow, someone who could maybe help me, someone who spoke Spanish or knew what to do. I nodded, grateful. They offered to let me stay the night in a room similar to the other churches, a cot, a blanket, a roof. I accepted without hesitation. I ate a bowl of watery soup they gave me. I lay down on that hard cot, and for the first time in 3 days, I closed my eyes without feeling like I was going to die of cold. I slept. I slept deep. I dreamed of my house, of David, of hot food and a soft bed. When I woke up for a second, I forgot where I was. For a second, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But no, it was real. All of it was terribly real. In the morning, the pastor took me to the office again. He gave me coffee and a sweet roll. I ate slowly, savoring it, because I didn't know when I'd eat again. He spoke to me in English and gestures. I understood someone was coming. I had to wait. I waited for 2 hours in that office, watching the clock on the wall tick by with cruel slowness. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like a day. And then the pastor came back and said something that sounded different. It sounded like goodbye. He walked me to the church door. He gave me a blessing, placing his hand on my head, and then, with a sad smile, he pointed to the street. I understood. I couldn't stay. The church wasn't a shelter. It was just a pause, a breath. But I had to keep going. I had to go back to the streets. I had to keep finding a way to survive. I left that church with a full stomach, but an empty heart. And I walked. I walked without knowing where. I just knew I had to keep going, because giving up meant dying, and I wasn't ready to die yet. I must have been walking for an hour when I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just being tired, it was something deeper. It was the weight of absolute loneliness, of abandonment, of knowing that in this entire state, in this whole city full of people, there wasn't a single person who knew who I was, no one who missed me, no one who was looking for me. Michael had erased me from the world. He'd turned me into a ghost. I sat on a park bench to rest. I watched families pass by, couples, kids playing. I saw life, a life I no longer had. And it was right there, sitting on that bench, watching the world go on without me, that I understood something terrible. I understood that I could die right here, that I could just close my eyes and never open them again. And nobody would know. Nobody would cry for Rafael Garcia. I'd just be another body found on a bench, an old, nameless man who died of cold and loneliness in a strange city. And maybe that's what Michael had planned all along, to let me die far away, with no witnesses, no guilt. I stood up from that bench. I wasn't going to give up, not yet. I walked aimlessly until I got to a street with coffee shops and stores. I saw my reflection in a shop window and had to look away. I looked like a vagrant. A 5-day beard, rumpled clothes, sunken eyes. I kept walking until something stopped me. A voice speaking Spanish. I froze. I turned my head looking for where it was coming from. It was a small coffee shop. The door was open, and from inside I could hear a song in Spanish, an old song I knew. I walked in without thinking. The place was cozy. Wooden tables, the smell of fresh coffee. Behind the counter, a young woman was wiping down cups. She looked up when I came in. She looked me up and down. I could see the moment in her eyes, the split second where she decided if she was going to kick me out. To my surprise, she smiled, a small but real smile. I walked up to the counter, my steps shaky. "Excuse me," I said, my voice hoarse from crying and disuse. Do you speak Spanish?" She tilted her head, studying me. "Yeah," she said, "I speak Spanish. Do you need something, sir?" Her voice was soft, kind. It didn't have that tone of fear or disgust I'd heard from everyone else. I felt something inside me just break. After days of not being able to communicate, of being invisible, of screaming in a language no one understood, someone was finally listening to me. "I need help," I said, and my voice cracked. "Please. My son left me here. I have no money, no ID. I have nothing." She put down the rag she was using. She looked at me, hard. And then she said something I will never forget. "Sir, are you okay?" "Sit down. I'll get you some water." I sat at a table near the window. She brought me a glass of water and sat down across from me. She introduced herself. Her name was Sarah. She was 28. She worked at this coffee shop, which her aunt owned. She'd studied Spanish in college because she'd always loved the culture. I told her my story, everything. From the moment Michael showed up at my house with Jessica to the moment I woke up alone in that hotel. I told her about the papers I signed, the trip, the abandonment. I told her about the nights in the bus station, the cold, the hunger. I talked for almost an hour, non-stop. She listened without interrupting, just nodding, her eyes getting wider and wider, her expression shifting from shock to sadness. When I finished, I realized I was crying. Again, she passed me a napkin. "Mr. Garcia," she said, her voice trembling, I think this is a thing." Her words hit me like ice water. "What?" I asked. She looked around, making sure no one else was listening. The cafe was almost empty, just one couple at a table in the back. "What happened to you?" she said, lowering her voice. "This is a scam. I read about it. A granny dumping scam, but usually it's at a local hospital, not in Alaska." I just stared at her, processing the information. It wasn't just Michael. It wasn't just an impulse. It was a plan, a known scam. "But why here?" I asked. "Why Alaska?" Sarah shook her head. "To isolate you. It's the perfect place. It's far from home. It's cold. You don't speak the language well. Without ID, it's almost impossible to get help fast. It's the perfect place for this kind of crime." I felt sick. Michael had planned it all, every detail. Jessica wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his accomplice, a professional. And I had been so stupid, so naive, so desperate to believe my son loved me that I signed my own death warrant without reading the fine print. "Those papers I signed," I said, my voice trembling. "They weren't for medical insurance, were they?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "They were probably power of attorney forms, authorizations to sell your property, to access your bank accounts, to take control of every single thing you own." Every word was a knife. "Your son and that woman, they've probably already sold your house, emptied your accounts, and disappeared. That's what they do. That's the pattern." I put my face in my hands. My house, the house where I raised my sons, where I lived with my wife before the divorce, the house my father visited when he was still alive. My house was being sold, or was already gone, and all the money I had saved for 40 years, my pension, everything, was being stolen by my own son. "I have to go back," I said, desperate. "I have to get back to LA. I have to stop this." Sarah put her hand on my arm. "First, you need ID, and that can take weeks, maybe months." Weeks. Months. I didn't have weeks. By then, there'd be nothing left. "Come with me," Sarah said, standing up. "You can't stay on the street. My apartment is tiny, but I can help you, at least for tonight." I was going to refuse. I still had some pride left, but my body was failing me. I was exhausted, sick, desperate. I nodded. She spoke to her aunt, who was in the kitchen. The aunt came out, an older woman with her gray hair and a bun. Sarah explained something to her in English. The aunt looked at me with that look, pity. But she nodded. Sarah finished her shift. She locked up the cafe, and she walked me through the streets of Anchorage to an old apartment building with narrow stairs. We climbed to the 3rd floor. Her apartment was minuscule. One room that was the kitchen, living room, and dining room. A door to a tiny bathroom, and another door that I guessed was her bedroom. But it was clean. It was warm. It was more than I deserved. Sarah made me hot tea and gave me clean clothes. They were my grandpa's, she explained, handing me a thick wool sweater and some pants. He passed away 3 years ago. These were just in storage. Wear them. I changed in the bathroom. The clothes were a little big, but they were clean, and they smelled like soap. When I came out, she had a bowl of soup and bread ready. Eat, she said. I ate, this time without crying, this time with something that felt a little like hope. While I ate, Sarah explained her plan. Tomorrow we're going to the Mexican consulate. I'll go with you. We'll explain everything. They have to help you. It's their job. I nodded. Also, she continued, I'm going to contact an organization that helps victims of elder fraud. They can help us gather evidence to report your son and that woman. Your son. It sounded so strange hearing someone else say it. My son, the criminal, the thief, the one who had sold me out. That night, I slept on Sarah's couch. She gave me all the blankets she had. Why are you helping me? I asked her before she went to her room. She paused in the doorway. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, My grandpa died alone in a nursing home. His kids, my dad, they didn't visit. I was little and I didn't understand why. When he died, none of them went to the funeral, just me and my mom. She wiped her eyes. I've always wondered how he felt, knowing his own kids had just abandoned him. When I saw you, she said, looking right at me, standing in front of the cafe, I saw my grandpa, and I thought maybe by helping you, I can make up for what I couldn't do for him. I didn't know what to say. All I could whisper was, thank you. She nodded and closed her door. I lay there in the dark, feeling for the first time in days that maybe I wasn't going to die in the streets of Anchorage, that maybe there was still hope, that maybe God hadn't abandoned me completely. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a week, I thought about David, my good son, the one who had warned me, the one who was probably worried sick because he hadn't heard from me. I had no way to contact him. My phone was dead. I didn't know his number by heart. In this day and age, nobody memorizes phone numbers. It's all in the phone, and my phone was wiped, erased, as if my old life never existed. I thought about what Michael was doing right now. Was he in my house, emptying it? Was he spending my money? Was he celebrating with Jessica? Or did he feel anything, even a little remorse, or was I just an obstacle he had finally removed? Those questions tortured me for hours. I found no answers, only more pain. But at least I was alive. At least I had a roof over my head. At least someone knew my name and was treating me like a human being. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had in days. The next morning, Sarah woke me up with coffee and toast. Today we go to the consulate, she said with determination. We're going to fix this. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well either. I realized that by helping me, she was risking her own peace, her routine, her simple life. But there she was, a stranger who owed me nothing, doing more for me than my own son. We ate in silence. Then we got ready to go. She lent me one of her grandpa's coats. It was thick and smelled a little like mothballs, but it kept me warm. Before we left, she looked me in the eyes. Mr. Garcia, I want you to know something. What your son did to you is a crime, not just a legal crime. It's a crime against love, against family, against everything that makes us human. But you are not alone. Not anymore. We're going to fight this together. Okay? I nodded, my eyes filling with tears. Okay. And we walked out into the streets of Anchorage. This time, not as an invisible ghost, but as a man with a purpose, with an ally, with a reason to keep fighting. The Mexican consulate was in a downtown office building. Sarah took me on the bus. I stared out the window, watching the city go by, still not quite believing someone was actually helping me. When we got there was a line of people waiting. Mexicans, mostly young, with visa or passport problems. We waited for almost 2 hours. When it was finally our turn, a woman at a desk received us. I explained my situation. She listened, her face serious, taking notes. When I finished, she sighed. Mr. Garcia, I understand your situation, but without any documents, without any ID at all. The process to issue an emergency passport can take 2 to 3 weeks. We have to verify your identity with the mainland, get your records, issue temporary papers. 2 or 3 weeks. It sounded like an eternity. Is there any way to do it faster? Sarah asked in English. The woman shook her head. I'm sorry. It's the protocol. We left the consulate with a piece of paper full of instructions and a date to come back in 5 days. I felt defeated. 5 days. And that was just to start the process. Where am I going to stay? I asked out loud, more to myself than to Sarah. She was walking beside me, silent. I knew the answer before she said it. You can't stay at my apartment, Mr. Garcia. My landlord is very strict. He doesn't allow guests for more than 2 nights, and I'm already in trouble with him over other things. I understood. I couldn't ask her for more. She had already done so much. There are shelters, she continued, but they cost money. Not much, but maybe $10 or $15 a night. I didn't have $10. I'd spent the few coins I'd begged on that hot pocket. I was back at zero, back to having no options. We walked aimlessly for a while, both of us thinking of solutions that wouldn't come. I have an idea, Sarah said suddenly. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. But it's risky, and you might not like it. I looked at her, waiting. I know a guy. His name is Brandon. He's an independent filmmaker. He buys stories from immigrants, refugees, people in tough situations. He pays cash to tell your story on camera. Not much. Maybe 80 or $100, but it's something. The idea turned my stomach. To sell my pain, to turn my tragedy into content for a stranger. But what choice did I have? When can we talk to him? I asked. Sarah gave me a sad smile. Right now. She pulled out her phone and dialed. She spoke in English for a few minutes, hung up. He can see us in an hour, at a cafe nearby. I nodded. I'd already lost my dignity sleeping in bus stations. What was one more camera? Brandon was a thin guy in his 40s with a scruffy beard and a professional camera hanging around his neck. He met us in a dark cafe filled with old books. Sarah explained my situation. He watched me while she talked, sizing me up with a filmmaker's eye. When she finished, he spoke to me. Your story, very strong, very sad. I pay $100. You talk, camera, 1 hour, okay? $100. Enough for a week in a cheap shelter. Enough to survive while I waited for the consulate. Okay, I said. He smiled and set up his camera. He sat me in a chair facing a window. The light came in from the side, creating shadows on my face. Now, he said, turning on the camera, tell me everything. And I told him. I told that stranger with a camera what I could barely admit to myself. And I cried in front of that camera like I was confessing my sins. I talked for an hour and a half. I told him about Michael, about Jessica, the trip, the abandonment. I told him about the nights in the station, the cold, the hunger. I told him how my own son had sold me out like I was garbage. Brandon never interrupted. He just filmed, adjusting the lens, getting closer to capture the tears I couldn't control. When I finished, I felt empty, like I had just thrown up my soul for that lens. Brandon turned off the camera. Good story, he said with a smile I didn't like. Very good. He gave me $100 in wrinkled bills. I took it with a shaky hand. It was the first time in my life I'd been paid for my own suffering. I felt dirty, but I had money. I had a roof for the week, and right then, that was more important than dignity. Sarah took me to a shelter near the bus station. It was a sad place. Metal bunk beds, the smell of damp, but it was a roof. It was more than I'd had. 3 days passed. 3 days in that shelter, sharing a room with other men who had nowhere to go. Some were alcoholics, some were addicts, some were just people who'd had bad luck. Like me. Sarah visited me every day. She brought me food from the cafe, kept me updated on the consulate. I just waited. That's all I could do. Wait and pray that the papers would come through, that I could go home, that I could stop what Michael was doing. But on the 4th day, everything changed. Sarah showed up at the shelter, her phone in her hand, her face pale. Mr. Garcia, she said, her voice trembling, you need to see this. She showed me her phone. It was a video. My face filled the screen. It was the interview with Brandon. But it wasn't on some private documentary. It was on YouTube, with English subtitles, and it had hundreds of thousands of views. How, I started to say. Sarah shook her head. I don't know. Maybe Brandon sold it. Maybe someone leaked it. But it's everywhere. A local news channel picked it up. They edited it, put dramatic music over it. The title is Elderly LA Man Abandoned in Alaska by His Son. It's going viral. I felt panic and relief at the same time. Panic because my pain was now entertainment for thousands of strangers. Relief because maybe, just maybe, someone in LA would see it. Someone who knew me. Someone who could help. There are comments, Sarah continued, hundreds of them, people offering help, people furious. She paused. And what? I asked. She looked at me with sad eyes. Someone in LA saw it, someone who knows you. He wrote in the comments. He says, "He's your son, David." My heart stopped. David, my son, my good son. He knew where I was. He knew what had happened. Sarah contacted David through the comments. She gave him her number. 2 hours later, her phone rang. "It's him," she said, handing me the phone. I took it with hands that were shaking so hard, I almost dropped it. "David?" I said, my voice cracking. "Dad?" His voice sounded wrecked, broken. "Dad, I saw you. I saw you in that video. Oh my God, Dad. What did he do to you? What did that bastard do to you?" I had never heard David talk like that. He was the calm one, the level-headed one. But now he sounded like he was about to kill someone. "I'm okay," I lied. I'm surviving." "No, Dad, you're not okay. Nobody who goes through that is okay." He was crying. My son was crying on the phone. "I'm going to kill him, Dad. I swear to God, I'm going to kill him." "No," I said. "Don't do that. I just need to come home. I need to fix this." There was a long silence. Too long. "Dad," he said finally, there's not much left to fix. If you're listening to this story from somewhere in the world, leave me a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. When you feel like the whole world has abandoned you, just knowing that people are listening, even strangers, gives you a reason not to give up. David told me everything. Michael had used the power of attorney forms I'd signed on the plane. He'd forged other documents. He had sold my house in East LA, to a foreign investor for half its real value. He had emptied my bank accounts. He had canceled my life insurance, naming himself the beneficiary. "It's all in his name now, Dad. All of it. And the worst part," his voice cracked, "the worst part is that he filed a missing persons report on you. With suspicion of senile dementia, he filed fake medical documents, paid off witnesses to swear you weren't in your right mind when you left on the trip. He's trying to have you declared legally incompetent to get total control of everything." I felt the floor drop out from under me. He hadn't just robbed me, he was trying to legally erase me, to turn me into a crazy old man with no voice. "Where is he?" I asked, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "Where is Michael?" "He's gone," David answered. "Him and that woman, Jessica. I looked into her. She's a professional con artist. She has 3 open cases for fraud against the elderly. She's done this before, Dad. This is what she does. She finds men with weaknesses, manipulates them into robbing their own parents, and disappears with the money. Michael wasn't just a son who made a mistake. He was a criminal, a predator, and I had been his perfect prey." "I'm fighting it," David continued, "but without you here, without you being able to prove you're sane and capable, it's hard. The lawyers say you have to come back. You have to show up in front of a judge. You have to sign papers contesting the competency claims." "How much time do I have?" I asked. Another silence. 10 days, Dad. If you're not here, in front of a judge, to personally contest it, you lose everything, for good. The house is already gone, but the rest, the accounts, the pension, the savings, it all legally goes to Michael." 10 days. It sounded like a death sentence. "I'm coming back," I said, with a determination I didn't know I had. "I don't know how, but I'm coming back. Dad, I'm sending you money, for the flight, for whatever you need. Give me the info for that girl who's helping you. I'll take care of it. I passed the phone to Sarah. She spoke with David for several minutes. When she hung up, she had tears in her eyes. Your son loves you very much, she said. He's wiring money tomorrow, for your flight, for everything. I just nodded, unable to speak, because something was changing inside me. For days, all I'd felt was pain, fear, sadness. But now, I felt something new, rage, pure, burning rage. I wasn't going back to LA to get my stuff back. Stuff can be replaced. I was going back to look Michael in the eye, to tell him the truth I'd held back my whole life, to let him know that his father wasn't some stupid old man who was going to die quietly in a foreign city. Rafael Garcia was still alive, and he was furious. The next day, Sarah received the wire transfer from David. $2,000, enough for a flight, for the shelter, for food, for everything I needed. I couldn't believe that my son who never had much money, who worked in construction, was sending me all that. It was everything he had saved, Sarah told me after talking to him. He said it doesn't matter. He said you're more important than any savings. I wept when I heard that. I wept because I had one son who loved me, and another who wanted me dead. The same blood, the same genes, the same upbringing, but two completely different men. Sarah helped me book a flight for 6 days from then. It was the soonest we could get with the emergency documents the consulate was processing. 6 days. Then a long flight. I would get to LA with 2 days to spare, 2 days to get in front of that judge, 2 days to save what was left of my life. 3 days later, Sarah came to the shelter with her laptop. David wants to do a video call, she said. He needs to see you, to talk to you face to face. We went to her apartment. It was more private than the shelter. She set up the laptop and made the call. The screen flickered. And then I saw my son, my David. His eyes were red. He hadn't shaved. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, his face just crumbled. "Dad," he said, and his voice broke completely. "God, Dad, you look so bad." I saw myself in the little video window. He was right. I looked terrible. 50 years older than when I'd gotten on that plane. "I'm okay," I lied again. "I'm better, thanks to Sarah." David thanked her in English. She nodded and left the room to give us privacy. And then it was just us, father and son, separated by a continent, united by a screen and a tragedy. "Tell me everything," I said. "I need to know everything he did." David took a deep breath. "Michael got back to LA 2 days after he left you in Anchorage. He came back alone, without Jessica. When I asked him where you were, he said you decided to stay in Alaska longer, that you were fine, having the time of your life." He paused, swallowing hard. I didn't believe him. Something about his face? Something was wrong. "I tried calling you. Your phone was off. I tried calling the hotel. They said you were no longer registered. That's when I knew something terrible had happened." His voice shook with rage. "I went to your house. The door was open. Michael was inside with 2 men emptying the place. Boxes everywhere. Your photos, your documents, everything was being packed up." I screamed at him. I asked him what the hell he was doing. He showed me papers with your signature, a power of attorney, an authorization of sale. It all looked legal. He wiped his eyes, angry. I told him those papers couldn't be real, that you would never sell the house. He just looked at me with that smirk he has. And he said, "Dad's not well in the head, little brother. It's better if I handle things from now on." I felt the rage building inside me, like a fire. "What else?" "I hired a lawyer," David continued. "With the little I had saved, we started digging. The papers you signed on the plane, they weren't insurance. They were powers of attorney. They gave him total control over your assets. You also signed sale authorizations, bank transfers, everything." He ran his hands over his face. "Michael went to the bank with those documents. He emptied your accounts, everything, your pension, your savings, all of it. And then he went to a notary. With paid-off witnesses, he filed fake medical documents saying you had advanced dementia, that you were unfit to manage your own affairs, and he named himself as your legal guardian." Every word was a punch. "He sold the house, Dad, to some investor, for half of what it's worth, because he needed cash fast, because he knew he didn't have much time before someone found out. My house, the house where my sons grew up, sold, given away like it was nothing. And Jessica? I asked. David made a disgusted sound. She's the mastermind. I found her real name. Fabiana Cortez. She's 38, not 40. She's from Colombia, but she has a record in 3 countries, always the same M.O. She seduces middle-aged men with money problems, manipulates them into robbing their elderly parents. She's done it at least 4 times that we know of. She has 3 active arrest warrants, and now 4. His voice was full of contempt. She taught Michael how to do it, how to forge the documents, how to manipulate you into signing, how to abandon you in a place where no one would look for you. She's a professional, Dad, and Michael was her star pupil. I felt sick. I hadn't just been betrayed by my son. He had sold me to a predator, a criminal who specialized in destroying families, in leaving old people to die alone. Where are they now? Gone, David said, frustrated. Michael cleared out his apartment. His phone is off. Jessica is nowhere to be found. The police are looking for them, but it's hard. We think they're in Miami, or maybe they've already left the country. With your money, with everything. He leaned back, exhausted. But there's something worse, Dad. Something I haven't told you. My stomach clenched. What else could there be? Michael filed a petition with a judge, David said, his voice shaking, to have you declared legally dead. I couldn't breathe. He said you wandered off during the trip, that you were suffering from dementia and probably got lost and died somewhere in the wilderness. He submitted the police report from Anchorage, the one that listed you as an unidentified old man found wandering. He used the video of you from the bus station as evidence of your mental decline. He wants you declared dead so he can inherit everything, clean and final, no legal battles. If the judge grants the petition, in 90 days you'll be officially dead, and everything you ever had automatically passes to him as your sole surviving heir. And you? I asked. Why aren't you an heir? David gave a bitter smile. Because that power of attorney you signed, it also included a will, a new will, one where you declared that I had abandoned you, that I never cared about you, and that you were leaving everything to Michael. The room spun. I would never sign that. I would never say that about you. I know, Dad, I know, but your signature is on it, and without you here, to say it's a fraud, to say they tricked you, there's nothing I can do. He wiped his tears, angry now. That's why you have to come back. You have to stand in front of that judge. You have to talk. You have to prove you're sane, that you don't have dementia, that this was all a scam. He looked at me, hard, through the screen. The judge has summoned you, officially. You have to appear in 8 days. If you don't, he rules in Michael's favor. You lose everything, even your name, even your life. 8 days. I had 8 days to get back to L.A., stand in front of a judge and prove that I was still alive. I'll be there, I said. I don't know how, but I'll be there. The flight is in 6 days, David said. Sarah has all the info. I'll be at LAX waiting, and we're going straight to the lawyer's office. We have to prep your testimony. We have to get all the evidence. He paused. Dad, when you're in front of that judge, you're going to have to tell him everything Michael did, everything you suffered. They're going to ask you painful questions. They're going to try to make you look like a confused old man. You have to be strong. You have to be lucid. Can you do it? I looked at him, through that screen. My son. My good son. The one who never abandoned me. The one who was fighting for me. I can do it, I said, because I'm not going to let him win. I'm not going to let him erase me. I am not going to die while he lives my life. But something had changed in me. It wasn't just determination. It was rage. Pure rage. For days I'd felt sad, hurt, pathetic. But now I felt something else, something darker, stronger. I wanted to see him. I wanted to look Michael in the eye. I wanted him to know he had failed, that his father didn't die quietly on the streets of Anchorage, that he had survived, that he was back, and that he was going to pay for every single day of suffering. David, I said, in a voice that didn't sound like mine. When they find Michael, I want to be there. I want him to see me. David nodded. He understood. He's going to pay, Dad, I promise you. He's going to pay for everything. The call ended. Sarah came back into the room. She saw my face and knew something had changed. Are you all right, Mr. Garcia? I nodded. Yes. For the first time in weeks, I'm all right. Because now I have a purpose. Get home, survive, and look my son in the eye when they arrest him. The next few days were a blur of hope and anxiety. The consulate finally processed my emergency documents, a temporary passport, an exit permit. Sarah helped me pack my small suitcase, the same 3 changes of clothes. But this time I was also carrying evidence, printouts from the viral video, screenshots, testimonies from elder fraud organizations, everything we needed to prove I wasn't crazy. The night before my flight, Sarah made me a special dinner, a stew, something warm. Thank you, I said when we finished, for everything. I don't know what would have happened to me without you. She smiled sadly. I just did what any decent person would do, what I wish someone had done for my grandpa. The next day, she took me to the airport. On the way, she told me she had started an online fundraiser. People want to help, she said. We've already raised almost $3,000 for you. So you have something when you get to LA, so you can fight. I couldn't believe it. Strangers, people who didn't even know me, were helping me. People from Alaska, from LA, from all over. The video had touched hearts everywhere. At the airport, before I went through security, Sarah hugged me. Fight, Mr. Garcia. Fight with everything you have, and when you win, write to me. I want to know how it ends. I will, I promised. And someday I'll come back to Anchorage. This city, it was my hell. I'm going to make it something different. The place where I almost died, but chose to live. I went through security with my temporary passport. The officer looked at it, then at me. He recognized me. From the video. He just nodded, stamped my paper, and let me pass. I got on that plane, knowing I was going back to LA a different man. I wasn't the stupid old man who signed papers without reading. I wasn't the blind father who refused to see the evil in his son. I was a man who had hit rock bottom, who had survived the cruelest abandonment, and who was now flying home to reclaim his life, or whatever was left of it. The plane landed at LAX at 6 p.m. 14 hours I'd spent staring out the window, watching the ocean, thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I still had to fight for. When the wheels hit the tarmac, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Real hope. I was back, in my country, in my city. I went through immigration. The officer looked at my temporary passport, looked at me, and just nodded. Welcome home, Mr. Garcia. I picked up my small suitcase, that same suitcase that had seen my entire hell, and walked toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open, and there he was. David. My son. My good son. When he saw me, his face crumpled. He ran to me. He hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. And we both just stood there and cried, right in the middle of LAX, not caring who saw us. Dad, he kept repeating over and over like he needed to be sure I was real. Dad, you're here. You're here. He wouldn't let me go. I didn't want him to. After weeks of feeling completely alone, being held by someone who loved me, it was like being born again. Finally, we pulled apart. He looked me up and down. You're so thin, he said, his voice full of worry. Are you? I survived, I said. That's what matters. I survived. Next to David were 2 men in suits. They introduced themselves as the lawyers he'd hired. Mr. Garcia, one of them said, we don't have much time. The hearing is the day after tomorrow, 9 a.m. We need to prepare your testimony. We need to prove you are of sound mind and were the victim of a calculated fraud. I nodded. Let's start now. And we did. Right there, in a coffee shop at the airport, we started to build my case. We spent the entire night at the lawyer's office. They made me tell my story 10 times. Every detail, every date, every paper I signed. They recorded everything. They prepped me, trained me not to break down, to speak clearly. Michael's lawyer is going to paint you as a confused old man, the lawyer warned me. He'll say you have dementia, that you signed those papers willingly. We have to destroy that narrative. By sunrise, I was exhausted, but I was ready. David took me to his apartment, a small place on the outskirts of the city. "It's not your house, Dad," he said sadly, "but it's your home for now." I walked in and met my granddaughter, Lucia, 6 years old with huge eyes and a shy smile. She looked at me, curious. "Are you my abuelo?" I nodded, unable to speak. She ran and hugged my legs, and I cried all over again. The morning of the hearing, I woke up early. Nightmares of Anchorage, the cold, the hunger. I showered and put on a suit David had bought for me. I looked in the mirror. I still looked old, tired, battered, but there was something different in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a defeated man. It was the look of a man who had survived. David's wife, Maria, made breakfast. Lucia looked at me with worried eyes. "Why is everyone so sad?" David picked her up. "We're not sad, mija. Just thinking." She looked at me. "My daddy says you're very brave, abuelo, that you survived something very bad." I smiled. "I did, mija, but I'm here now, with you." She hugged me, and that hug gave me more strength than any legal argument. We drove to the courthouse, and then I saw it. A black and white police car, and being escorted out in handcuffs was Michael. They had found him. Arrested 2 days earlier in Miami, hiding out in a luxury hotel, spending my money. Jessica had vanished, but they got him. Our eyes met. He saw me. His face, it was shock, fear, shame, maybe all three. I just stared, not with hate, not with love, just nothing. That man in handcuffs was not my son. We entered the courtroom. The judge was an older man, all business. He banged his gavel. "We will begin. Case of Garcia versus Garcia." For 3 hours, I told my story, everything. The lawyers showed the evidence, the YouTube video, the testimony from Sarah, the bank records showing the withdrawals, the forged medical documents. Michael's lawyer tried to discredit me. "Mr. Garcia, isn't it true you willingly signed those documents?" "I signed documents I was told were for insurance. I was deceived." "Isn't it true you have memory problems?" "My memory is perfect. I remember every single day of suffering your client put me through." The judge listened. When I finished, he called a recess. David hugged me. "You did perfectly, Dad." When we returned, Michael was called to the stand. He walked past me, head down. The judge was direct. "Did you abandon your father in Anchorage, Alaska?" Michael's voice was a whisper. "Yes." "Did you use documents signed by him to sell his property and empty his accounts?" "Yes." "Did you do so with the intent to defraud him?" Silence. Michael looked up, and he looked at me. For the first time, he looked me in the eye. I saw nothing. Just a coward. "Yes," he said. The judge made his ruling. "I hereby declare all transactions made by Michael Garcia to be null and void, having been secured through fraud and deception. I order the immediate return of all funds." I could breathe. "However," the judge continued, "the sale of the home in East Los Angeles cannot be reversed. The third-party buyer acted in good faith. I'd lost my house forever. As for Michael Garcia, he is remanded into custody. A sentence will be determined for fraud, elder abuse, and abandonment." The gavel fell. We walked out. I'd won. I'd gotten my money, my pension, everything but my home. But I didn't feel like a winner. I just felt empty. I'd lost my house, and I'd lost my son. David took me back to his apartment. That night, I slept. Really slept. The next morning, David showed me the fundraiser from Sarah. It was over 10,000. People from all over the world, Dad. They want to help. There were thousands of comments, stories from other people, children who had abandoned their parents, all of them thanking me for speaking up, for surviving. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the LA County Jail. It was from Michael. David saw me holding it. You don't have to read it. But I opened it. It was long, full of words like sorry and regret and manipulated. He said he had gambling debts, that Jessica, Fabiana, told him this was the only way, that he never thought I'd actually suffer. Please, Dad, forgive me. I'm still your son. I read the letter. Once. Then I went to the kitchen, turned on the stove, and burned it. I watched the words turn to ash. David watched me from the doorway. "You sure, Dad?" I nodded. "Some things can't be forgiven, David. Not because I'm hateful, but because forgiving him would be a lie. It would mean what he did wasn't that bad. And it was. He left me to die." Michael wrote 4 more letters. I burned them all. He was sentenced to 12 years. With the money I got back and the money from the fundraiser, I bought a new house, a bigger house, for David and Maria and Lucia. "This isn't for me," I told him. "It's for us, my real family." It wasn't the house I grew up in. It wasn't the house with 40 years of memories, but it was a home. And at 74, I finally understood that's all that matters. 6 months after I got back, I woke up one morning and the weight was gone. I heard Lucia singing in the kitchen. I smelled coffee. I got up and I felt peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. I looked in the mirror. I was still old, still scarred, but my eyes weren't empty anymore. Lucia ran to me. "Abuelo, at school today we have to talk about someone brave. I'm going to talk about you." I held her. "And what are you going to say?" "I'm going to say that my abuelo went to a very cold place and he got lost. But he was brave and he came home, and now he lives with me and tells me stories." I had to wipe my eyes. David put his hand on my shoulder. "She's proud of you, Dad. We all are." We sat down to breakfast. Simple food, huevos, frijoles, but it tasted better than any king crab in Anchorage, because it was real. A few months ago, I got an email from Sarah, the documentary that Brandon made, the one with my story. It won an award in Alaska, and because of it, the state passed a new law to protect elderly people in just my situation, my suffering. It served a purpose. It saved other people. I'm 76 now. I still have the nightmares sometimes, the cold, the bus station, but then I wake up. I hear Lucia laughing. I see David, and I know I'm home. Michael took my house, he took my money, he took years of my life, but he didn't win. Because there are victories you don't measure by what you get back. You measure them by what you refuse to lose. And I refuse to lose my humanity. I refuse to die. I refuse to be erased. And I'm still here. Rafael Garcia, survivor, father, grandfather, and I am free.